The planet Carinine was known across the galaxy as a place where hope ended. Its gravity crushed weak bodies. Its storms tore metal apart. Its land cracked and shifted like it was alive. The Galactic Alliance never planned to save anyone sent there. Carinine was not a prison. It was a grave. When a species was damaged, lost, or no longer useful, the Alliance abandoned them on that world and moved on. No rescue missions were approved. No mercy votes were held. The decision was always the same: let them die. Thousands of aliens were scattered across the broken land. Many were injured. Many were starving. Some were children clinging to parents who could no longer stand under the heavy gravity. Their ships were destroyed during forced landings. Their emergency beacons were weak and ignored. A single recorded message echoed from an old Alliance tower, repeating again and again that rescue had been canceled and survival chances were zero. The aliens understood what that meant. They had been erased from the galaxy without a weapon fired. Some aliens cried softly, saving their last energy. Others screamed at the sky in anger. A few simply lay down on the cold ground, closing their eyes, waiting for the planet to finish its work. The storms grew stronger each day. The ground trembled more often. Large, shadowed shapes moved beneath the surface at night. Carinine hunted anything that lived on it, high above the planet. Alliance observation ships floated safely beyond the storms. Their crews watched the surface through screens. They saw the dying aliens and recorded data without emotion. One officer said it was a mercy not to intervene. Another said resources should not be wasted on species that could not survive. No one argued. In the Alliance, survival was proof of worth. Those who failed were forgotten. Far from Carinine, on a small human patrol ship, an old emergency receiver suddenly activated. Dust fell from its casing as lights blinked for the first time in years. A weak signal came through, broken by static and interference. It was not advanced, it was not clean, but it was real. The message carried only a few simple words, asking for help and saying they were still alive. The human officer monitoring the system froze when she read it. According to official records, there were no survivors on Carinine. Rescue operations had been canceled weeks ago. The signal should not exist. She called the captain immediately. Captain Mara Vance looked at the data in silence. She knew what the Alliance would say. She also knew what humans had done in the past when rules were wrong. Without asking permission, she ordered the ship to change course. The crew did not question her. Humans had a reputation across the galaxy. They were called Deathworlders, born on a planet filled with predators, disasters, and constant danger. Other species feared them, but humans did not see themselves as special. They only knew one thing clearly: leaving people. To die was never acceptable. As the human ship approached Carinine, the planet filled the screen like a wounded beast. Thick clouds twisted violently. Lightning flashed not. Gravity alarms warned of extreme conditions. Any other species would have turned back. Humans checked their systems and continued forward. The ship entered the storm and was thrown hard. Metal screamed as winds slammed into the hull. The landing was rough and uncontrolled. The ship crashed into the ground, sliding across rock and ash before finally stopping. Silence followed, broken only by the storm outside. On the surface, the abandoned aliens watched in disbelief as the human ship appeared through the dust. They thought it was a hallucination brought by fear. No one came to Carinine. No one survived Carinine, but the ship was real. The door opened, and humans stepped out into the storm. They wore heavy armor marked with scars from past battles. Their movements were slow but steady under the crushing gravity. The storm pushed against them with full force, but they did not fall. The aliens felt fear rise in their chests. Deathworlders were dangerous. Everyone knew the stories, but these humans did not raise weapons or shout commands. One human removed her helmet. Her face showed exhaustion, but her eyes were calm and focused. She spoke in a clear, simple voice and said they were there to take everyone home. The words did not make sense to the aliens. Some laughed weakly. Others cried. One small alien asked why humans would risk their lives for those the galaxy had already abandoned. The human answered that no one was useless, and that being left behind did not mean being worthless. Before the aliens could respond, the ground shook violently. Cracks spread across the surface, and massive creatures burst out from below. Their bodies were hard and fast, shaped by the planet to kill anything weaker than itself. Panic spread instantly. The aliens screamed and tried to run, but gravity pulled them down. The humans moved without hesitation. They formed a protective line between the creatures and the refugees. Weapons fired with controlled precision. When one human was thrown through the air and slammed into the ground, he stood back up with damaged armor and continued fighting. Blood flowed, bones broke. Still, the humans did not retreat. The battle ended as suddenly as it began. The creatures lay dead on the broken ground. The storm continued to rage, but something had changed. The aliens looked at the humans with new eyes. These Deathworlders were not fearless. They were wounded and tired, but they chose to stand anyway. An elder alien warned the humans that the planet would eventually kill them too. The human captain looked around at her crew, helping injured aliens stand and sharing supplies without being asked. She said they already knew the risk. That was the reason they came. She explained that Deathworlders survived not because they were stronger, but because they refused to abandon each other. Above the planet, Alliance ships received reports of human activity. Humans had landed. Humans were fighting the planet itself. Humans were building shelters instead of leaving. Commanders argued, alarmed by what they saw. Humans were breaking protocol. Worse, they were proving that the rules were wrong. On the surface, shelters rose from wreckage and stone. Food was shared. Heat was shared. The abandoned were no longer waiting to die. They were learning to survive alongside Deathworlders, and across the galaxy, the first whispers began. When everyone else walked away, humans stayed. And once Deathworlders chose to stand with the forgotten, they never stopped at rescue. They changed everything. The storm on Kara-9 did not stop, but the fear on the surface slowly changed shape. The abandoned aliens were no longer lying down to wait for death. They were moving, helping, learning. Humans worked without rest, turning broken ship parts into shelters, heat units, and water collectors. Every movement was slow under the heavy gravity, yet no human complained. Pain was normal to them. Danger was familiar. Captain Mara Vance watched the small camp grow. Aliens from many species stood close together now, no longer separated by fear or weakness. Humans shared food even when supplies were low. They taught the aliens how to move safely on unstable ground, how to listen for deep vibrations before the planet cracked, how to survive storms by reading the wind instead of fighting it. Kara-9 was still deadly, but humans treated it like an enemy that could be learned, not avoided above the planet, the Galactic Alliance argued. Emergency meetings were called. Screens showed humans defending aliens the Alliance had already declared dead. Some leaders were angry. Others were afraid. Humans were not supposed to interfere. Humans were not supposed to change outcomes that had already been decided. One Alliance commander demanded that the humans leave immediately. He warned that if they stayed, consequences would follow. Another commander asked a quiet question that made the room fall silent. If humans could survive Kara-9 and save those abandoned, what did that say about the Alliance's choices? The Alliance voted quickly, not on rescue, on control. A fleet was sent toward Kara-9, not to help, but to stop the humans. On the surface, humans felt the change before they saw it. Sensors picked up energy patterns in orbit. Captain Mara knew the Alliance was coming. She gathered her crew and spoke clearly. Leaving was still an option. No one moved. Some humans were injured. Some were exhausted. All of them stayed. The aliens noticed the tension. An elder asked if more danger was coming. Mara answered honestly and said yes. The alien asked why humans did not leave now. Mara replied that leaving would mean proving the Alliance right. That was something humans refused to do. The first Alliance ships entered orbit and blocked long-range communication. A message was sent to the surface, ordering all humans to evacuate immediately and abandon the non-essential life forms. The words were cold and official. The humans listened, then ignored the message completely. The Alliance did not expect resistance. Humans had no fleet here, no heavy weapons, no support. From the Alliance point of view, this would be quick. Then the humans did something strange. They BROADCAST, not a threat, not a demand, a story. They transmitted images of the abandoned aliens being saved, of children standing again, of weak species surviving a death world with human help. They sent medical data, survival techniques, and simple words spoken by aliens who had been left to die. The broadcast was sent on open channels across the galaxy. The Alliance tried to block it, but the signal spread faster than expected. Other species saw it: traders, colonies, independent worlds. They saw humans fighting a planet to save lives the galaxy had thrown away. On Kara 9, the Alliance fleet launched drones toward the surface. The drones were meant to disable human equipment and force evacuation. They did not expect resistance from the ground. Humans adapted fast. They used the planet itself. Gravity traps, dust storms, terrain weapons built from scrap. Drones fell from the sky, crushed or buried by Kara 9's violence. Humans did not overpower the Alliance. They outlasted them. Aliens watched in shock as humans bled, broke, and kept moving. They had never seen a species accept pain so calmly. To humans, pain was information. Fear was a signal, not a command. One night, during the worst storm yet, a shelter collapsed. Humans rushed inside without hesitation. The roof crushed, 2 of them. Others pulled them out anyway. 1 human did not survive. The aliens saw humans stand in silence for a moment. No speeches, no anger. Then they continued working. That moment changed everything. The aliens understood something the galaxy had forgotten. Humans did not measure life by efficiency. They measured it by connection. The Alliance fleet hesitated. Losses mounted. Public reaction across the galaxy grew loud. Questions spread. Why were humans risking extinction for strangers? Why did Deathworlders care so much? Inside the Alliance Council chamber, fear replaced confidence. Humans were not breaking the rules with weapons. They were breaking them with example. A final order was prepared. Planetary purge. Total wipe. No witnesses. The order was never sent. Independent fleets arrived first. Traders, small nations. Species that had once feared humans, they came not to fight, but to stand in the way. They had seen the broadcast. They had seen the truth. The Alliance realized too late what humans had done. They had turned a forgotten death world into a symbol. Leaving now would not erase that. On the surface, humans kept building. The abandoned were no longer abandoned. They stood taller. They learned faster. Some even laughed again. Captain Mara looked at the rising shelters and the strange new community forming under a red sky. She knew the fight was far from over. But the galaxy would never be the same, because once Deathworlders showed the universe that no one deserved to be left behind. The lie of survival at any cost began to die. And the galaxy was just starting to understand what that meant. The Alliance fleet did not attack, but it did not leave either. It stayed in orbit, watching, waiting, unsure. The independent ships that had arrived formed a loose barrier around Kara 9. No one spoke loudly. The silence itself became a message. The galaxy was no longer united behind the old rules. On the surface, life continued to grow in a place never meant to hold it. Humans and aliens worked side by side, turning survival into routine. What once felt impossible slowly became normal. Storm shelters were improved. Gravity paths were mapped. Warning systems were built using simple tools and shared knowledge. The abandoned species were no longer weak victims. Under human guidance, they learned how to adapt, how to fight the planet without becoming cruel like it. Children born during the first weeks of survival took their first steps on Kara 9. Their bodies grew stronger than expected. Their lungs adapted. Their bones thickened. The death world was changing them, just as humans had been shaped by their own harsh planet long ago. The Alliance watched these developments with growing concern. Kara 9 was not supposed to create survivors. It was meant to erase failure. Instead, it was becoming proof that the Alliance had been wrong. Worse, it was creating something new. Species that had once been labeled weak were becoming stronger together. A final council meeting was called. This time, the room was divided. Some leaders still argued for destruction, saying the experiment was too dangerous to allow. Others hesitated, haunted by the broadcasts that continued to spread. The images of humans standing between monsters and refugees had reached even the oldest corners of the galaxy.
One leader spoke quietly, asking a question no one wanted to answer. If the Alliance destroyed Kara 9 now, after the galaxy had seen what was happening, would anyone ever trust them again? The answer was clear, even if no one said it aloud. On the surface, Captain Mara Vance stood on a ridge overlooking the settlement. She had aged in those weeks. Scars marked her armor and her face. She knew the Alliance might still strike. Humans prepared anyway. Not for escape, but for defense. Not just for themselves, but for everyone who stood with them. The aliens sensed the tension. Some asked if the humans would finally leave if the attack came. Mara told them the truth. Humans could leave, but they would not. Leaving now would mean teaching the galaxy that compassion had limits. Humans had learned long ago that limits like that always came back to haunt you. The Alliance sent one final message. It was not an order. It was a question. They asked the humans what they wanted. Mara replied with a simple answer. She said they wanted the Alliance to stop using Deathworlds as graves. She said survival should not be proof of worth, and weakness should not be a death sentence. She said Karen 9 was no longer an exile world. It was a home. The message spread across the galaxy instantly. The Alliance did not respond right away. Days passed. Storms raged. Creatures attacked and were driven back. The settlement held. Then the Alliance fleet began to withdraw. Slowly. Quietly. Without victory speeches, they did not apologize. They did not admit guilt. But they left. Independent ships remained. Supplies arrived. Medical teams followed. Species that had once hidden in fear sent representatives. Karen 9 was officially reclassified. Not as a death world, but as a protected zone. The decision shocked the galaxy. For the first time in recorded history, a death world was not erased. It was respected. The abandoned species stood together and watched the sky clear. Some cried. Some laughed. Some simply stood in silence, unable to believe they were still alive. Humans did not celebrate loudly. They rarely did. They went back to work. There was still much to build. Much to protect. In the years that followed, the story of Karen 9 spread far and wide. It was told in trade stations, classrooms, and military academies. Not as a story of battle, but as a lesson. The galaxy learned that Deathworlders were not feared because they were violent. They were feared because they were stubborn in ways that broke systems. Humans refused to accept that cruelty was normal. They refused to accept that survival required abandoning others. New alliances formed around this idea. Rescue fleets replaced exile fleets. Death worlds were studied, not used as weapons. The old logic of the alliance weakened with every passing year. Karen 9 became a symbol. A place where the forgotten were not erased, but reborn. Children who grew up there became leaders, explorers, and protectors. They carried both human resolve and the strength of survival earned together. Captain Mara Vance did not live to see all of it. She died years later, quietly, far from battle. But her name was remembered, not as a hero, but as a reminder. When asked why humans were different, historians struggled to explain it simply. In the end, they always returned to the same truth. Humans were born on a world that tried to kill them every day. They learned early that survival alone meant nothing if it cost everything else. And when the galaxy abandoned others to die, the Deathworlders stayed. Not because they were ordered to. But because leaving was never an option.